Hi, Casual Gaming Geek here, and I have here an Atari 2600. But I have here a much cuter Atari 2600. So yes, I got the new Atari 2600 Plus. I'm going to just do a quick overview of it, my quick thoughts on it. I'm not going to do a whole big review as other people have already done that, and there's really honestly not that much to talk about with this in my opinion. So let's just get started. Obviously, the first thing you're going to notice with this is it looks exactly like an original Atari 2600. Although they went with the 4-switch version instead of the 6-switcher, which I would have preferred the 6-switch, but I totally understand though why they went with the 4-switch, because it is a lot easier to fit into something this size. If they wanted the 6-switcher, it would have had to be a little bit wider. Really, they did a great job with not just the look but the feel of this thing. Like the switches, they feel basically exactly like what you should expect them to feel like. Even the sprung switches for reset and game select are great. The plastic, it feels pretty similar to the original one, not exact, but again, I don't have a 4-switcher, so I don't know if that was different than the 6-switcher. But it feels pretty good, and it's got a decent heft to it considering it's just an emulation box, and it's much newer than this thing. Now it's nowhere near as hefty as this, but I mean this thing is just a brick. And that's even with that being a light 6er, not a heavy 6er. But overall, I love the build quality. I love just the overall feel, the look, the wood grain. I think they completely nailed the design of this, and honestly, it's adorable. I mean, this thing is small. It's smaller even than the Lego Atari, which was smaller than the original, actual Atari. Like, this thing is tiny, which is great because you can easily fit it anywhere in your entertainment center if like me, you don't have a whole lot of space. Now, the one thing with the look of this that is very different than the original is that the Atari logo actually lights up on this. Now, when I first heard this, I was like, ooh, I don't really like that, because, I mean, I don't like extraneous lights, in my entertainment system. I've got, I have that Rad 2X that has the LEDs on it, I taped over the LEDs. I don't like seeing that kind of stuff. So I was kind of like, this might not be great. But really, it does not stick out that much. It's kind of more of a faint glow than an actual light. And you don't notice it, so I'm not really going to I don't really have anything to complain about with it. So taking a quick look at what you have here for controls. So you have your power switch, your color black-white switch, which does actually work, and it actually puts it into black and white, which is kind of cool. Then you got your game select and your game reset. Then around the back we have our power input, which uses USB-C. Now this does not come with a USB power brick, which I don't like that things don't come with it. If you're going to sell a product, sell everything you need to power it up. Companies should assume that people have nothing. So I don't like that it doesn't come with the power brick, but it is nice that it's USB-C, it's just kind of becoming the standard for everything. Then you have your left and right controller ports. It takes the same original plug as the original controllers, and the original controllers do work on this, which is awesome. So here you have an HDMI port, and it's a full-size HDMI port, which is great because occasionally you'll get things with mini or micro HDMI, and who uses that? Then you have your left-right difficulty switches. Just like on the 4-switcher, they're on the back like this, the little switches. Again, I would have preferred it if they were on the front console with the big silver switches, but I completely understand why they went with the 4-switcher, so it's fine that they're on the back. And then over here you have a switch that I kind of like, although I don't really see myself ever needing to use. It is a aspect ratio switch, so you can switch between 16:9, which is what most TVs are now, or you can display the image in the original 4:3. Now, I personally, I'm only really going to ever play in 4:3. I like playing the games how they were meant to be played, but so I'm not really ever going to touch that switch, but it's there if somebody wants to use in widescreen. So now, even though I already had an original Atari 2600, I wanted this because of how easy it is to set up and use, and actually being able to get a decent picture quality. So instead of having to deal with a 50-year-old almost power brick and electronics, it's nice and new. You got USB-C, which is nice and standardized. And so you just plug the USB-C into this and into the wall, and then a single HDMI cable, no fiddling with switch boxes or having to go to channel 3. You don't got to do that. You just plug it right into your HDMI and it works perfectly. I have no issues with that. I love how easy it is to connect and set up and use. And as part of that, I love that instead of being like, just ROMs loaded on a SD card or whatever, I love that they designed that you can use the original cartridges, or you have to use original cartridges. I absolutely love that, because I've got a pretty sizable collection of Atari games, and I love that now I can actually use them, because prior to this, I didn't really ever play my Atari. I love the games, I love the console, it's great. It's just a pain to hook up, and the image quality with the original one, at least on my modern TV, was terrible. My old CRT died a few years ago, so I can't use that. So I have to use just my modern TV, and the games don't look great. But now with this, I can actually play these games again, and they look fantastic. Everything looks and sounds exactly as it should, and honestly way better than it would have on the CRT. Also on the topic of games, I love that it came with a 10-in-1 game cartridge. So this has 10 great games on it. So we've got Adventure, Combat, Dodge'em, Haunted House, Maze Craze, Missile Command, Real Sports Volleyball, Surround, Video Pinball, and Yar's Revenge. Now, I already had Combat, Adventure, and Missile Command. I might actually have Real Sports Volleyball, I'm not sure about that. And I had Video Pinball. Honestly, the single greatest game on here for me is actually Yar's Revenge. I love Yar's Revenge. I played it on emulators and like plug and play things before, but I never actually had an original cartridge of it, so I love that this has it on here. And honestly, now some people may not like this, but I love it. So to switch between the games, it's not like a built-in menu system or anything. You use actually dip switches on the back of the cartridge, and I love that. I don't like emulation systems or whatever that use different menus and stuff, or mods for consoles that have menus built in. I don't like that. So I love that it's simple. You just set your dip switch, put the cartridge in, turn the console on, and you can play your game. It's great. No stupid menus to navigate through. I will say I do actually have one slight issue with how you set up and use this, is the boot up time. You put your cartridge in, you turn it on, and then you gotta wait a couple seconds, and then a big Atari logo comes up on screen. Then you wait a few more seconds, and then it loads loads the game into ROM. So basically, it loads the ROM off of that into the emulator. Because again, this is emulation, not an FPGA or anything. So it takes a while for the game to actually start when you first turn the console on. Obviously, that's not a problem once you're in the game. Everything runs as it should. But my one issue is the boot up time. Now, according to Atari, they're going to come out with different firmware updates for like game compatibility and stuff, and that's something else I'm going to talk about in a minute. Is that so you can actually use the USB-C port for the power. You can plug it into your computer and update the firmware. So hopefully there's a firmware update soon that improves the load time. It's not the end of the world, but it's kind of annoying, and I would really like to see that fixed. So I will talk, so I mentioned this, so I'm going to talk briefly about compatibility. So this is fully compatible with a lot of Atari 2600 games, but not all. Now, I don't think there's any games that I have that don't work with it. There might be one or two, but for the most part, I'm pretty sure my collection will all work, and most games will. But there's a handful, and I don't remember the reasons. You're gonna have to look up somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. That some games don't work. And actually, the big one that kind of is disappointing for me is Pitfall 2 doesn't work. I don't own it yet, but I know it's supposed to be really good, and I would have loved to get it to play on this. Again, they're going to do firmware updates and stuff for this, and hopefully one of those will fix the compatibility issues sometime soon. And when that happens, I'm going to get Pitfall 2 because, again, I heard it's a great game. So that's just something to be aware of. If you go on Atari's website, they do actually have a list of games that are tested to work, games that are untested, and games that don't work at all. So you can go there, check that out, see if, make sure that any games that you have do work. And then another thing, so I'm not actually able to test this at all, is that this thing also does support a lot of, not all, but a lot of Atari 7800 games. Now, I don't own any Atari 7800 games, so I'm not going to be able to, tell you about the experience playing that. I assume the whole, setup and work, setup and the load times. I'm going to assume that's all the same as the 2600. But again, I don't own any 7800 games, so I can't really tell you how those are. I'll probably get some now that I have something that can actually play them. So going back onto the topic of usability, so in the box you get the console and you also get this. This is a replica of the original CX40 joystick. So this is known as the CX40 Plus. And honestly, it's fantastic. It feels exactly like it should. The one thing which I'm noting is that the stick feels it's a slightly stickier rubber, but that may just be because all of my original controllers are old and the rubber could have, degraded with time or whatever. But this feels exactly perfect. It's got exactly the right amount of travel. It's got, correct weight, correct dimensions. Button feels great. Honestly, it's perfect. I think Atari does sell these separately. So if you wanted to get another one, you can do that. But again, it does support and work perfectly with the original controllers. And I was playing some multiplayer stuff and using my original controllers. It works great. One thing of note that I took note of this, I don't think Atari even commented on it ever, but the controller cord is actually significantly longer than the original cord. So I have, for mine, I do have an extension cable, but you don't really need it as much with this because the cord is maybe 2 feet longer than the original, 3 feet maybe, which is great. I love that. Since people aren't sitting, set up as close to their TV. Now, I just thought of something that's this interesting issue. So, again, like I was just saying, people don't sit as close to their TV, and I just thought, so, the original Atari had the built-in cable for connecting to the switch box for, connecting to the TV. And this cable is really long. You can see it bundled up here. It's a really long cable. And then the power for the original Atari was also a really long cable, and that's because people would move this far away from your TV, and you have this with you when you're playing, and that's why the controller cables were short on the original. So you have to use the switches a lot for doing things in games, changing game modes, restarting games, stuff like that. Or especially games like the Space Shuttle Simulator game, you use the switches for playing the game. But I just realized, so this thing, it uses, it's got a couple foot long USB cable and maybe a 6 foot long HDMI cable. You're not going to be able to have this very far from your TV based on the lengths of the cables that they include with it. So you're going to actually have to sit pretty close to your TV, and if you have a big one, that might hurt your eyes, your neck, or whatever, because you still do need to use the switches on the console to control it. So that's something to take note of. I just realized that now, that you're going to have to actually sit pretty close to your TV unless you get really long HDMI cable and a really long USB-C cable. So just keep that in mind when you're getting this and getting your whole, you're getting it set up, you might need longer cables. My only other major issue with this isn't actually anything to do with the console. It has to do with this. So they also released alongside the console, the CX40 Plus, and the 10-in-1 game cartridge, they released this, which has a 4-in-1 game cartridge of paddle games, and it includes brand new paddle controllers. Now when I saw this, I was really excited because my paddle controllers, like I'm sure most people's are not great. They're very jittery and very hard to actually play paddle games, which is a shame because I love games like Breakout and Kaboom. Although prior to this, I didn't actually own Breakout. But so we got the controllers and opened them up and we're using them, and they're better than the original, but they still have some jitter. So I don't know if that's a mistake in manufacturing, or if that's just how the games are programmed, or what, or maybe it's something built into the emulation to make it seem. That could be something built in. So it uses the Stella Emulator. I don't know what kind of options there are in that, but that might be something built into the emulator. But it still feels jittery, which I'm disappointed about because I would like a nice smooth experience. Now, don't get me wrong, the controllers are way better than my original ones. They're actually usable, but it is a little disappointing that they don't work perfectly. Now again, that may be by design, or that just may be how the games are programmed. I don't know. I don't have enough experience with how they felt originally because I wasn't born in the 70s. So, what are my overall thoughts on this? Well, I don't really need to ask that. I'm sure that's pretty obvious. I love this thing. I think it's fantastic. I love that I can actually play my original cartridges now. I could have played them before, but I can actually play them and enjoy them how they were meant to be played. Nice crisp image, good sound, no fiddling with the stupid switch boxes like I did on the original one. It's great. I love it. Really, it's got some issues, which any device is going to have issues. Nothing that there's really no problem, no issue with this that's a deal breaker for me. Yes, the paddle controller is still a little jittery. That's fine. Yes, the boot up time is a bit long. It's fine. But the actual gameplay experience feels great. There's very little lag, and I love it. Now, is this for everyone? Maybe not. If you don't have a sizable Atari collection, or you're not really looking to get into collecting original cartridges, this probably isn't the device for you because, again, you need the cartridges to play it. There's no built-in games on this. So if you're not already an Atari collector and you're not really interested in it, I would say pass on this. But if you have a good, decent-sized Atari collection and you enjoy playing the games, absolutely this is worth getting, just because it's perfect, and it's actually made by Atari, which is really cool. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. Have you gotten an Atari 2600 Plus yet, and are you planning to? Please let me know down in the comments below. Well, until next time, so long.